Lawyers for News 24 journalist Karyn Maughan and arms deal prosecutor Billy Downer have described former President Jacob Zuma's private prosecution attempt as vindictive and without merit. The pair is seeking to have the summons issued against them set aside, citing an abuse of court processes. Zuma has accused them of unlawfully publishing his medical records when seeking a postponement in the arms deal corruption case. Siyanda Ngobo has more.
Journalist Karyn Maughan and prosecutor Billy Downer's lawyers have argued in the main that former President Jacob Zuma's private prosecution attempt is baseless. This, they say, is because of a lack of standing when it comes to irrelevant certificates of non-prosecution. They accuse Zuma of abusing court processes, saying it's driven by ulterior motives aimed at further delaying the arms deal corruption trial.
It's an attempt to harass Mr. Downer and prevent him from carrying out his duties. It's unsustainable, was launched for the purpose of further delay and preventing or obstructing Mr. Downer's performance of his duties.
Maughan's lawyer, Stephen Budlender, says the fact that Zuma refers to her as a racist bigot who is peddling a false narrative in official court papers attests to the claim.
Mr. Zuma's summons is an attempt to discredit Ms. Maughan, to silence her, and to prevent her from reporting on the progress of his criminal trial. Now, to put that in context, what the papers demonstrate is that Ms. Maughan says that as far as I'm aware, I am the only journalist who reported on the initial trial who is still reporting on what is going on now. That's not denied. So the only person who has the full history is Ms. Maughan. And Mr. Zuma seeks to discredit her and prevent her from doing her job. He seeks to intimidate and harass her. And that is the purpose of this private prosecution.
Budlender says even at a procedural level, Zuma's legal challenge is flawed.
Even if this court was somehow to leave that aside and focus on the merits of the wording of the certificate with respect is by no means clear that it refers to Ms. Maughan, and we submit that it doesn't. We've quoted the certificate at paragraph 27.1. This is the second certificate. And it says, I, Elaine Zungu, duly appointed DPP, hereby certify that I have seen all the statements and affidavits on which the charge particularized below is based, and I decline to prosecute any person in connection with this matter at the instance of the state.
The matter has been adjourned to Wednesday, where Zuma's lawyers will respond to the various arguments that have been made in court. For Newzroom Afrika on Channel 405, I'm Siyanda Ngobo in Pietermaritzburg.
Let's talk more about this then with the legal analyst, Advocate Romeo Nthambeleni. Advocate, a very good evening to you. Good to have you on the program, as always. So, Karyn Maughan's legal team arguing that former President Jacob Zuma describing her in his submissions as a racist bigot proves that he's got, and I want to get the right phrasing here, extraordinary animosity towards her. How much does that matter in a case like this?
Okay, thank you, Tembekile. Good evening to you and the viewers. And it's an important point that is being raised, and there is a language that is not allowed in the court papers that is it's not supposed to be used. So that statement on its own, you had when they were arguing in court, it really it does not sit well in a constitutional democracy, and the issues that are being ventilated in court are important, and we have to rather look at the issues rather than to actually demean others in the language that we actually use in court. That is important.
And in terms of, and I say I'm going to group these, but they're separate matters. The recurring theme around these knowledge prosecute, if I'm even pronouncing that correctly, certificates which would basically be issued when the NPA says, look, we don't think that's the case that we can prosecute successfully, but here's a certificate if you wish to pursue these people privately, as former President Zuma is now trying to do. Around Karyn Maughan, we're hearing again the argument that she was not cited on the certificate as a person for prosecution. Similarly, we had the same argument when former President Zuma was trying to go for Cyril Ramaphosa, the current president, in a separate matter. Why is there this apparent either misunderstanding or ambiguity about the powers that such a certificate grants the party seeking the prosecution?
Yeah, that's a good question, Tembekile. It's the question of interpretation and how you can extend the interpretation in relation to the certificate. And then there are two main issues that are are different. The certificate that has been issued against Downer, and then the argument that there's no certificate that is issued pertaining to Karyn Maughan. So that is very, very much important. And in terms of when you extend that certificate, how far can you actually extend that certificate? So the second argument that is being argued for Karyn is that there's no certificate that is in relation to her. And then, in relation to the certificate that was issued by the NPA, it only applies to Downer. And then you had the argument in relation to why they're saying that even with that certificate, they are not actually entitled to actually proceed with the private prosecution against him because he's doing his job and he must be allowed to do his job without any interference.
And in terms of the private prosecution route, we know it's still largely one that's considered inaccessible for many South Africans. How much of the future of such prosecutions hangs on cases such as Zuma versus Downer and Maughan?
Yeah, it will be a good authority. Although this is a rare species in our profession, you are quite correct that this case will serve as a precedent on how to actually deal with private prosecution, in particular the certificate to prosecute and how you interpret it and how you can actually extend it. So I think that this is going to serve as an authority going forward, dealing with this certificate and private prosecution. So it's an important decision that will serve as precedent in future.
And at issue is former President Jacob Zuma claiming that basically Advocate Billy Downer, the lead prosecutor in his arms deal corruption trial, leaked, he says, medical information to journalist Karyn Maughan for publication. They've argued that that information was not leaked. It was part of the public record because it was already before the courts, right? Say this case goes all the way and there's a finding against them. What would be the worst that could happen for such an offense?
Okay. If it goes against who?
If the court finds that indeed, let's say, the documents were leaked, what would be the worst that would happen to Advocate Downer and Karyn?
Look. I think it's a decision which the court will actually have to determine in terms of what will be the consequence of such leak and how far has the unlawfulness gone. But in terms of you asking for a prison sentence or a non-custodial sentence, that is not for us to actually determine now. In relation to what the court can actually rule, but highly unlikely looking at our constitution and the balance of the right to report in terms of the constitution and what can be reported. And what you're saying, Thembekile, is important that the medical certificate that was already leaked was in a court document, and then what was actually written in that medical report is also important. How far did the doctor actually describe the content of the medical condition that the former president is suffering from, and that has to be balanced against the right to report, which is a valid right in terms of the constitution. So those are the balancing effect that the courts actually have to look at.
Thank you very much for that, Advocate Romeo Nthambeleni. Good to speak to you as always, legal analyst and friend of the show, I suppose.